And we would have to play this game of the what if we both get called out? What do we do? And it was an argument because I was like, look, I have to go out. I don't have a choice because I am the on call detective. And his was, well, there's only three of us here, so I have to go out too. So, like they say, it takes a village to raise a family or raise a child. That's what we had to do. We had to rely on people.
Welcome back to the Fit for Duty podcast, number one podcast for first responders dedicated to promoting wellness and breaking the stigma surrounding mental health. Today we are joined by a very special guest, my friend and former partner, Jessica, a former female law enforcement officer, now DA investigator, who shares with us her insights and experiences on what it's like to be a cop while being married to another cop. Jessica shares her perspective on the challenges and rewards of being a female in law enforcement, as well as her tips for managing the unique demands of being married to another officer. Join us as we dive into this candid conversation on navigating the ups and downs of a first responder's life. Learn how to build a strong and supportive relationship with your partner, both on and off the job. Let's get started. We're just going over what to like working in law enforcement, but then also your spouse being law enforcement as well. If you want to kind of give us an idea, your background and how that's been, and meeting your husband and him, your initial thoughts with that. Obviously, when you met him, you're like, oh shit, because he's already working at the time. So it's did that cross your mind at all? Did it not cross your mind?
So I've been in law enforcement for 15 years, going on my 16th year this year. I met my husband working as a female law enforcement. I just really didn't date that much. I was always working overtime. When I would date, if you try to date anybody for me outside of law enforcement, people kind of got a little standoffish, especially men. I don't know what it was guys didn't want to date a woman who was a cop. I don't know if it was they felt like it was emasculating, which it's not, or what the problem was. But usually within a couple of weeks, we would start seeing some problems, whether I was working overtime, getting called in. A lot of people who weren't working that type of job didn't quite understand. So usually those relationships would be done pretty quickly. Wasn't really looking to date, but I got introduced by a friend of mine who also worked with my husband, who thought we would be a good match.
So tell us about that.
The rest is history.
Yeah, tell us about the beginning. We talked about it not how long we talking when you found out it wasn't going to work, and what was those problems that came?
Oh gosh. So a lot of the problems, the one in particular I remember, we had a homicide that occurred. I came out for National Night Out to work just a couple hours with the community that I worked in. And we ended up getting a homicide that night, a fresh homicide. Guy just shot his family member, and he was still on scene. So we got there, took him into custody. I think it was the second or third on scene when that happened. Took him into custody. I had to end up staying there to help maintain the scene. Detectives were going to probably be about an hour out just because of where we were. And I remember vividly, I went back to the office to write my report, and I was supposed to meet up with that person I was dating for dinner. He was not in law enforcement. And he kept texting me over and over and over again, are you done? Can you hurry up and get home? I've been waiting for you to go to dinner. And I kept telling him, I don't know how long this will take. This is a homicide investigation. I'm trying to get my report done because we have somebody in custody. And I don't think I got home till 9, 10 o'clock that night, but it turned into an argument. Just because you say one thing, but things happened at work and I ended up having to stay over. I think it was about 4 hours that night. So that's what I would see usually within the first few weeks.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Just no, it was kind of that whole, an hour or so, that's one thing, but it was the not understanding that when our day is quote unquote done, sometimes it's not done. Just because I was only supposed to be there till 7, that's just not how it worked. And it would turn into a fight, and then it would turn into fights about my friends are making fun of me because I'm dating you because you carry a gun, so you could protect me and I can't protect you. Those were kind of some of the other arguments that would kind of ensue.
Oh, so it kind of got into his own people, kind of. What do you mean, like
Like kind of like emasculation. Yeah, they
Yeah.
were
Well, it's
he felt
essentially
emasculated.
well, it's essentially because like a woman, like she has more powerful job, I guess, not knowing what he did, more powerful job than him, and like a lot of men just can't handle that. Like I had this conversation with a friend of mine. She owns a sales company um, in a different part of California, and she's not law enforcement, but she's very powerful and makes a ton of money and a lot more money than her now spouse, and it is a major issue for them. And like it's not even like a position of like law enforcement or masculinity. It's more of just the fact that she makes more money and she is a very type A personality. And I just don't think people like to see that in women, whether it's law enforcement, politics, like nursing. I mean, it takes a certain guy to kind of deal with that because listening to her is kind of funny because, um, I've obviously been in law enforcement and dating, and I know I never personally did it, but we don't. I remember when I was a supervisor, I would see a lot of guys, like younger guys, um, they were dating a female and they would almost be like, they would like tell this big war story, like, oh, I'm gonna be a couple hours late because we had this homicide. And like that would almost bait the female in non-law enforcement. Like, thought it was
hmm
the coolest thing ever. Don't get me wrong, after a while that wears off and wives get mad, but like the girlfriend who's non-law enforcement for like these new deputies, they would like tell them everything that they could
Yeah.
because it made him seem like this Superman, and they would like flock to the new guys.
Yep.
They're like, oh, we're working the homicide, or I'm going to be late. I'll be there when they can. I'll be like, okay, well, come home as safe as you can. I'll be here waiting for you. But I think that just shows like the two different type of gender, like almost perspectives. And
Yeah.
being in law enforcement is even worse because it is a very powerful position. Guns, like you are now the protector, and we live in a society with a lot of weak ass men, anyways, who can't deal with that. But yeah, that's definitely has to be challenging. It's interesting to hear that side of it. Like I said, because guys fucking make up stories that way that whoever the female is waiting for him is just going to be like all over him at like dinner because he risked his life and he probably was writing a traffic ticket or some stupid shit like that. But
It's so true
Yeah.
though, because I'm happy that I've been with Emily since the Marine Corps and as a cop because I always tell people, well, you know her, Taylor. So when I went on the SWAT team or when I was detective or investigator or in the Marine Corps or deployments, like she could care less about any story. She's just like, yeah, you're still my husband. Like, you know what I mean? And like no matter what
Yeah.
I did, it doesn't matter if I'm like, yeah, it didn't matter what position or title I got. It's just like, like you're my husband. Like you're still like it's just not like she's not gonna get all crazy and like, oh my God, like this huge like no war story is gonna make her think that much more. It's just like I love you because you're my husband, you're who you are, but you cannot like what do you like, what do you call that? Like the whole big head thing, don't get your head too big. Like you're still it's
Yeah.
fine. Like you're fine.
Yeah.
And so I've always liked
but
that
that
you hear stories of other guys though, they're like you would hear them on the phone or talking to some girl on like social media and the girl's just going all crazy and it's like, bro, you're not
yeah, never.
even
Oh my god, yeah. But Jess, do you think it has something to do with like you're bringing up in law enforcement? Like, why don't you tell them for whatever you want to release, but exactly how young you were when you essentially, because I know your story, but how young you were when you
Uh-huh.
actually were exposed to law enforcement, and you have essentially been raised from a very young age all the way up through law enforcement. So do you think that plays into part of like you being happily married to a cop now? I mean, all you've ever known really is cops. Like, so then, I mean, like professional wise, obviously, not your parent, your dad, or anybody, but like the men who you surrounded you and helped raise you outside of your family has all been cops. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does. So thinking back, like my parents aren't in law enforcement. My parents are either, my dad works outside. He's a, he's a laborer kind of working. My mom's in medical. So I've actually thought I was always going to go towards the medical direction. But I became an explorer with the SO when I was 16. I had a friend at high school that kind of brought me into it. And yes, it's crazy now that you say it that way. I kind of, besides having my dad in my life, because my parents are still married, happily married for going to be over 40 years. I think it's like 45 years they've been married. So I saw that relationship, but then going outside of my dad, seeing how other guys are and being at that age where you start kind of dating, you see what you want in a guy. You know, oddly enough, you know, Rios, you talk about Roger. I was an explorer when Roger was there. There was a lot of other guys that you guys talk about. I was an explorer around them. We had a sergeant that passed away a couple of years ago that I was an explorer riding on his shift. Um, so I kind of knew that probably did play a role. Now that you say that, it probably did play a role in what, because I respected them so much that it makes you have a whole different respect of the field. And then the type of personality that comes with law enforcement, um, that's appealing to me. But the craziest thing is my husband is not super type A. Thank God for him, because I'm extremely type A. He's not. He actually is, he's type A at work, but when it comes to home, like he can kind of turn that off. Um, and for the most part, he's kind of that, you know, yin to my yang. If I didn't have him, we were both type A, there would be no way this would work. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of the guys I was around growing up, that really did help me see what I wanted in a partner for life.
Well, man, it's just, yeah, like you have a good point. You're saying those are the type of qualities I want. It's not like, for people listening, they're saying, "Oh, you were around cops, so you wanted to marry a cop." It's just like that's what you're exposed to. So you see the discipline and the commitment and the loyalty
Yes.
like that comes with it. And they also, you know, like you're getting into law enforcement, they're going to have an understanding of you. Like, obviously know your husband yet too, and he's the same way. Yeah, he's not a type A personality, but he's still a pretty hard charging cop. But it's um, so how does that change? I don't know. Like, how does that? I don't know how to ask it, but like it's almost like you guys live two different lives, not as people, but more as a married couple. Like, do you guys leave work at work? Does work come home with you?
Oh, that's a
Like,
good question. Yeah.
everyone kind of talks. Does that make sense? Like, so for me, I
Yes.
almost imagine like being married to another cop. Like, okay, we're both at work and we both have these two private lives. We talk about it, but then like, and because somebody else on the last podcast asked this question about burnout and not letting it affect your marriage, and I think this kind of goes hand in hand. As
Right.
so, is your marriage just about you guys and your kids, or does work like spin in there somehow and you guys kind of make it work? If that makes any type of sense, but
Yeah. So work does come into play. We do talk about work for certain parts. We don't make that a whole night, whole conversation, whole dinner. We don't make it that way. We kind of spend about a 10 to 15 minutes as our rule. And when I talk about work, I want it to be, if I'm having a bad day, now it may have to go longer than that depending on the day. Um, with what my husband does, he sees unfortunately a lot of dead bodies, and recently it's been a lot of children. Um, so sometimes he has to come home and vent a little bit, and I want to be there for him for that. Now where I'm at, I don't get exposed to that as much, but I'm still getting exposed to some pretty significant cases, some pretty violent crimes. So we more talk about when we're just having the bad day, or even when something really good happens. I kind of have this little core group at work that I talk to and I maintain a pretty good friendship with. And the funniest part is they all knew my husband first. they they actually met him when they grew up as kids together. So it's kind of nice now. So I'll come home and say, "Hey, so and so said this funny thing about this when you guys were kids," and he's like, "Oh yeah, you know, I remember that now." So we try to keep it as a very minimum conversation, but it sneaks in. Most of the time, it's about the kids, about what we're doing for the week, family trips that we want to go on, maybe even things we want to do. Like we're doing lots of home improvement things. We both love to work in the yard, so we're talking about. We had a really, really old cat that passed away. So now that we can have that area back, we're going to redesign it and clean it up. So we kind of go into those kind of conversations a bit more.
no, and I think that's good, and I think that's it's obvious
Yeah.
for people, but some people, like, even if I talk to the cops or non-law enforcement, when they hear about two cops being married, they think like all they envision is like two cops just sitting there talking fucking cop work all the time. And I try and tell people, you
No.
understand, like like cops are people. Okay, yes, you're married to another cop and he understands you. But when it comes down to it, I think that's where people fucking make a mistake. Like, if being a cop identifies your marriage, like, you got some bigger issues than that. Like, and so I like how you
Yeah.
said it of like, yeah, we talk because you guys should talk. Like, you should talk work because you get it. But at the same time, your marriage is not defined by your jobs, you know. And I think that's
Right.
where people have a hard time understanding it, and I don't understand why. And I see young cops make the same mistake. It's almost like they met through the job and they just, that's all they do is talk. I know couples that literally like are almost in competition with each other, whether it's promotions. I know you and your husband, like, that's just not, I was going to ask that, but I was like, I already know the answer to that. Because I just know who you guys are. But yeah, like, people
Yeah.
just got to remember, like, if you're just people, you know, like, if you're listening to your talk, like, oh yeah, we talk about work. And then we just kind of go on about our day. I will say it's kind of a funny thing for me, a funny question, but do you find their conversations like at dinner, if he comes home and is like, oh, this traffic accident happened or this leg bail, whatever it is, you're just like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like, it's an easier way to process it because he doesn't, or like vice versa, you don't got to explain to them like the lingo, or like if you don't have to explain to them in fine detail, because if he's talking about a traffic accident and this and different stuff that went on or a pursuit, like, you already kind of get it. So you're just like, oh yeah, just hearing the story, compared to if you talk to somebody, maybe you just first start dating or is non-law enforcement, it can almost be
Yeah.
exhausting because they're like, well, did anybody else do this or did this happen to this? And you're just like, fuck, like, you're reliving that entire story. So do you feel like when he talks
Right.
to you, you really don't absorb his stress because you get it? You know what I mean? Compared to, like,
Yeah.
say another spouse who is non-law enforcement has to hear it. And we always talk about bleeding on them. But for you, do you find it healthy that you guys talk because you essentially are not absorbing his trauma
Yeah.
or stress because you get it, like, you understand it?
Yeah. And most of the part now with what he does, I sometimes think I've gone through a lot of trauma and a lot of stress in the past. This now it's with my job now it's a little less, um, but he probably has seen a lot more than I can ever imagine, than any of us can ever imagine, based on what he does now. But yeah, he comes home and I can kind of, and I think this is more of just in tune being married because, like you said earlier, you have to. Yes, the job kind of brought us to meet, but we had to find out that we were compatible. Like, I'm a very, again, type A. We're not compatible. I'm done. I'm not going to try to make it work. Why? Why waste my time? But we're very compatible. And I can feel when he comes home that, okay, something's bugging him today. We need to talk, get the kids to bed early, whatever. And sometimes he'll unload, and sometimes, and I get it. I understand seeing, a dead kid in the car. I understand having to go through the pictures, having to do the diagrams to make sure that kind of just to make sure you've got everything right. And then him working so hard to make sure there's prosecution on those cases to the fullest extent.
Yeah.
For him, it takes a toll. So I can kind of read his energy and he could read mine. But we're also the type of couple that if I'm having a bad day, like right now, like something happened right now and I'm mad, I can call him. I'll be like, you got 5 minutes? And he's like, yep, I got 5 minutes. And I'll just bleh and let it all out. And then, you feel good? Yep, I feel good. All right, get back to work. Um, but I think it makes it so quick of a conversation just to get it out because we understand, we get each other. Not
Yeah.
saying that
So
you
that,
can't do that, with non-law
yeah.
enforcement couples, but it takes a longer time.
Well, I guess that was because it really brings in an interesting dynamic and kind of gets me thinking when you're saying that. So, taking your cop hat and all your law enforcement years off, and I understand also like your schooling background, so you get it a little bit deeper, like on the psychology side of it. But so, what would be your advice to, we'll say wives, just for the sake of it, what would be your advice to non-law enforcement wives that have a law enforcement like husband? And obviously that can go back and forth. And I know that's a very loaded question, but I mean, as far as like, so I only say this because that's how we're talking. But so your husband calls you, who is a cop, and you get it. So the conversation is almost quick and easy. He doesn't feel questioned. He doesn't feel like pressed. He's essentially like giving you some info to make himself feel better. You kind of know what not to say. Like, is that the cop in you, or are you just like for letting him talk and not asking too many questions, even if you're curious? Because as a cop, I would assume when he tells you some things, there has to be a lot of curiosity. Well, did A, B, C, D, and E, and F, and all this, and
Yeah.
management, and all of this happen? Or you just
Yeah.
kind of let that go? Because if you do, I think that is just being a significant other that's holding their curiosity in, because I can see a law enforcement spouse even asking even more inappropriate questions because you want to know, what to ask. So, but for a
Mhm.
non-spouse, like, do they just listen? Do they ask a couple questions? Do you think curiosity on their side of it can pull out more? Like, what is your stance on a non-law enforcement spouse asking a lot of questions about whoever is venting to them? You know what I mean?
I think you kind of said it when you said just kind of listening. It's because, like you said, I know that sometimes there's things that he'll talk about, and I know it's like a decision that was made above his head or something else had happened that I know that there's more to it. And he knows I know there's more to it, but he's telling me this one particular point he's mad about or he's upset about. I know that I just kind of let him go. And it was funny. I don't remember where I heard it from, but I could have swore it was some kind of like therapist or psychologist that said, when a spouse is venting to you, they don't want you to fix it. That's not what the venting's for. It's not to fix it. It's to listen. And as a spouse, your kind of your job is to be on their side. If you start poking the bear and you start going at them, now they're going to see you as the enemy, and they're already dealing with it from management or higher up. So they're already venting to you maybe about something that admin made a decision about and they don't agree with. Now you're like, well, based on this from HR, this from what I've seen, they have to make that decision. Now he feels like he can't turn to you
Amen
either.
to amen to that right there. Like that needs to be the your little highlight reel that you do, Gilbert. Like that needs to be it right there, and played 1,000 bazillion times to people. Like put on that could be the whole podcast right there, and just stop. Like just fucking stop. Oh my god, because that is my pet peeve when people question the living shit out of me when I don't want to answer those questions. Like just fucking listen to me for a little bit. Don't ask, even if you
Yep.
have questions. Like same for another fucking time. Sorry to interrupt, but I
Yeah,
just had
and
to. Like that's
no,
golden.
you're no, you're right, because it's like I can't remember where I heard it from, but it's like as a spouse, they're not there venting to you because they want you to fix it. They don't want that. You're on their team. You when you got married and you decided to make a life together, you're teaming up. And that's the same with discipline with the kids. That's the same with so it's like why when they always tell you when you're disciplining your kids, you both have to be on the same side. Well, why not when something goes wrong at work? Why are you not on their side? Why are you fighting against them? Why are you trying to question what they did? That's not your job as a spouse. Your job is to be on their side. And maybe not just law enforcement, maybe marriages in general, people just want to argue. Why? Why? Be on their side. That's your job. You can later think in your brain whatever you want to think, but your job is to be on their side. And especially in law enforcement, when we feel everybody's against us lately, they need that team member at home, whether you're law enforcement or not as a spouse. So have their back. We do it at work every day. I have all my partners' backs at work. I wouldn't think twice. If my partner told me to go do something, mind you, I know it's lawful and legal to do, I'm going to go do because I'm going to trust them that they have my best interest at heart. Why wouldn't I do that for my spouse that I decided to give my entire life to and build a life with? I mean, it doesn't make sense when you turn around and backstab him per se. They get enough of that at work. They don't need that here.
No, I agree. Like amen to all of that, because that is. I feel like listening is just a lost art in today's society. Like, and it goes. This is a different tangent, but it really is the same. Like I feel like some people are listening, they already have a response. Like as you're talking, they haven't even heard you. Like they're not listening, they're just waiting for an opportunity to tell you their opinion or to ask their question. And it's just like, fuck, here, let some people talk. Like it's not
Yes.
about you. Like just let people talk, especially, and spouses and different stuff like that. Like there might be a lot of curiosity. But yeah, exactly like you're saying, kind of like you said, you read your husband's body language. I can tell he kind of wants me to engage in this conversation, and ask him more questions. Or I can tell this is not a fucking conversation he wants me to ask questions on. He simply wants to dump
Right.
it off. And then we say, okay, let's go have dinner,
Yeah.
play with the kids, and I won't ask about it. I'll ask him if he's good later, and that's about it.
Right. And I would think, we've been together for 12 years. I should be able to do that pretty well at this point. If I'm still having problems with that, then we have a whole nother issue we need to deal with, honestly.
Well, yeah, and I think
but I can read his body.
Yeah, like part of listening is reading their body language. So no, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think so many people can learn from that because we get caught up in our own, and I do it all the time too. Like when my wife comes home from teaching and she wants to talk about kids, like I've kind of figured it out over my years, but about being listening. But at the same time, I'm just like, because like teachers union, not to go off topic, does some weird shit, right? So she'll be like, well, because the union, we got to do this. And I'm thinking, at first I was like, the fuck are you talking about? Like your union should be fighting doing this. Like take your liberal ass union and go do something else. Like they're doing nothing for you. But then that was a cop in me because I was like, oh, well, our union would have done this. And I caught myself always telling her, my union would have done this, and my union would have done this, and we would have done this. And she's like, well, mine doesn't do that. And I'm like, why the fuck not? And then what I realized is I wasn't listening to her. And I'm normally a really good listener. Like that is probably my strong point. But
you know what I mean? That's actually really true.
Yeah, but like I was just caught in the whole like wanting to tell her, you know what I mean? Like, no, this is how it should be. And like listening to you, it's like, fuck, yeah, that's exactly how we need to be. Like, it doesn't matter what my opinion is all the time. If someone doesn't ask it, like, I'm not going to give it. So I think I really do think that was spot on. Even for people, law enforcement or non-law enforcement spouses, like you can take a lot out of that last few minutes. So,
yeah.
Definitely, because I will say from experience, in the beginning, I was that person who, like Taylor said, I wouldn't listen to what Emily was saying because being in the Marine Corps, and then now she works management for UPS, and it's always been something different than what I've done. And then when she would tell me her problems, because I wouldn't think her problems to me were not problems compared to my problems. That's how I always thought, coming from both those professions, and I was like. So when she would tell me something like management did, because even though she is management, there's obviously someone hired from corporate, and it gets there's a bunch of crazy shit. And so I'm just like, well, that's stupid, and I wouldn't think about listening. I'm just like, that's dumb, like or whatever. And so I had to learn real fast, like what Taylor was saying, like on how to know. Just fucking, she just wants you to listen, and so I learned that the hard way. But I would say now, like I get exactly why you say like that's important because things are 100 times better with just listening because it's not so much that they're wanting an answer from you. It's more just like, hey, I just want you to be able to listen to me. And when it goes on, but just better. It's so much better.
Yeah, well, they want your time. Like more than anything, like you shown like you were worth this 5 minutes of my undevoted attention and love directly towards you. No phones, no nothing. Like just hear it out. And Jessica, I'm kind of. No, go ahead.
I was going to say it's kind of crazy because I think that's where spouses that aren't in law enforcement, that's where the tough part is actually more for the other half that is law enforcement because you're a fixer, you're a hurry up and get the story over with. And then it's like, really, that's a problem. And so that's the one positive thing about both of us being in law enforcement is we can understand the problems within the community. I think that's where we benefit. I mean, there are a lot of things that run against us as two people in law enforcement, but that's the one thing that it kind of goes in our favor.
They well, kind of on those same lines that we're talking. And you and your husband are so unique. So, and because I understand your guys' personalities, but I'm sure you still run into it because you're hot-headed Portuguese. But how do you run in, or how do you mitigate the whole like? If you have a bad day, he has a bad day, kind of, or like you've had all those cases. I know the type of caseload, and I know what type of, what I mean? How do you kind of get away from the whole one-upper? Well, fuck, oh, you had a bad day? Really? Well, how about my bad day? And I had this, and I had this court, and this witness, and this baby, and this case, and I had to get the kids. Like, how do you guys mitigate that? Like,
so it's easier now because of the spot I'm in. So it's not as crazy as it was. But when I was in detectives, we actually had a couple arguments about this. So when I was in detectives,
hey, hold on, and time out. Because I know we are going on that same, like, how do you mitigate that? But then I also know you guys are scheduled like with call outs and importance of call outs in there. So if you could build that all in it together. But
oh yeah, that's exactly where I was going. So like, in detectives, there were 6 of us in detectives. Both of you know this because Gilbert, you're my partner, and then Taylor, you're on another team. But I mean, I considered you one of my partners too because you guys came in and helped us a lot, and so we worked together. Every 6 weeks, we were on call for 1 week, meaning any phone call at 2 a.m. that patrol had. I mean, and most of the time, I was the kind of person that I'll just go out. It was most of the time, even if it was something really simple that probably could wait till the next day, 99.9% of the time, I just got up, got dressed, and got in my car and went out. It was just easier to go in person and talk to everybody and get the information. Mind you, I only lived a couple minutes away, so it was easier. But every 6 weeks, you were the on call detective. Well, my husband's on call 24/7. There are times that he can like say, I'm out of town this weekend, so don't call me or whatever. And that's fine. But his unit's very small and they cover a very, very, very large area. I think it's all the way from Los Banos, all the way down to Fort Tejon, and then over to San Luis, Monterey kind of area. So he has a major area that he covers. And he even has to go to Sonora sometimes and work. And there was a week or two there where I would remind him, you need to tell your supervisor or your sergeant that I'm on call this week, so you can't really be called out. Like, he needs to leave you as last. And he'd be like, well, there's only 3 of us on the team in town this week. And we would have to play this game of the what if we both get called out? What do we do? And it was an argument because I was like, look, I have to go out. I don't have a choice because I am the on call detective. And his was, well, there's only 3 of us here, so I have to go out too. So, like they say, it takes a village to raise a family or raise a child. That's what we had to do. We had to rely on people. My parents lived 5 minutes away. So we relied on them. They were a big help. My mom was like, I'm a phone call away. She works full time still. So I would feel guilty, but she's like, look, if you have to call me at 2 a.m., call me at 2 a.m. And it was that I will come to you because I don't want you to wake up the kids. And then my in-laws lived about 20 minutes away. So they, at the time, so they were a secondary option that we had as well. But you have to just kind of put your pride aside sometimes. And you have to, it's hard for us to let other people in to help with our kids and help with our family dynamics, but sometimes you have to. You have to start putting trust in other people. And that's really hard for a cop to do. I still to this day have like a handful of people that get to watch my kids. I have one other person that I trust that's not family. They live right around the corner from us, and I trust their 16-year-old, 17-year-old daughter to watch her kids and her to watch our kids. That is it outside of family. So we had to have pretty lengthy discussions on the call out thing. That was a huge, huge like hiccup for about 2.5 years. So that's how long I was a detective. So
yeah, so I've had this conversation with a couple of people, not on the podcast, and it's very it's kind of controversial in a way, and you don't have to necessarily answer it 100% if you don't want to. It's not that bad. But I've always because I've had female deputies come to me more than anybody else, and to be like, hey, my husband is a cop, and I want to do this specialty, this specialty, this specialty, and this specialty. But the male cop, doesn't believe that the female cop should take on those roles. And yes, she should work, but then she shouldn't be in specialties because she should be home with the kids and doing all that. Like, and don't kill me because I cook and clean my house, people out there. She should be home doing the wife duties. Everyone knows that's not my type. Get out of here.
Barefoot, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, right?
But seriously, like I could not tell you how many female deputies have come to me for advice. And like, I remember one came to me and was talking to me. I was like, oh shit, where's this going? But anyways, that was her thing. It was like, what do you think? And I'm like, fuck, I honestly, I really don't know how to answer that. I was like, what is your goals? But what is your take on it that should, because obviously if you're both on call and SWAT and gang units and blah, 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 like it legitimately just would not work. There's no way in hell. You're like, you guys made it work, right? But I mean, like if you're on like, say if you're both in a major crimes type unit where you're constantly working, everybody's out, it's very hard. Do you see an issue with people being like, well, the female should take the back seat on that? Because I'll tell you my standpoint, I do, right? Like, I think that's stupid. I think that's bullshit. But there's a lot of people, and I know a lot of female cops who did not do certain specialties because of the hours, because their husband was a cop and or not a cop, and believe that they should be home doing wife things. I mean, that's a whole female cop thing, but a whole different podcast. But I mean, what is your take on
that? So kind of to start with, like, my husband met me in the job, so he already knew what he was getting himself into. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. But that's where I think the problem with female in law enforcement is because as much as we want to do all these things, especially when we become mothers and wives, we kind of still feel like we should be a little softer. And I still feel like that. Like, I still feel like I need to be a little softer. Thank God for him, because he kind of makes me sometimes realize that, hey, you're with the kids, you're not with your coworkers. You need to chill out for a minute. Because I'm a hot-headed Portuguese. So I thought I was gonna make you spit your water out. So he just kind of we had to have discussions about it. So he already knew I wanted to go into detectives. Luckily, with the county we were in at the time, not now, but at the time, but even now, it's still not as busy as other counties, like the county I work for now. I think those detectives up where I work are getting called out. They're getting called out every night. I've talked to a few of them and I said, how do you guys not just have straight up night detectives now? Because you guys are getting called out every single night. Like, I don't understand it. With us, mind you, Taylor, that was a conversation that was brought up. Do you remember that, Gilbert? There was a conversation brought up of having a night detective.
Oh, no, I don't
But we
remember
were literally you don't remember? Yeah, it was literally one night a week we would get called out. During my on-call weeks, I usually get called out at least once a week.
Oh, yeah, every week,
So
for sure.
yeah, at least once a week. Yeah. So I think it's for guys to say, especially a male law enforcement officer that's married to and his spouse his wife is a cop, to think that she's going to take a back seat. First off, you're dealing with a type A personality, so good luck telling her to take a back seat on her career and what she wants. But I think it's a healthy to have a discussion about it. If he's in a unit that's on call, running out, doing things every night, always busy, talk about a timeline. Hey, how long are you going to be in this unit? Okay, well, I want to do this next. So if I go into this unit in 2 years, if I wait 2 years until you come out and I decide to do it, what are you going to do? I think it's good to have a healthy discussion. And I also think it is good to have breaks between busy units like that to go back to patrol, to where you have a more better schedule. But like, SWAT, that's a call out basis. Those are discussions you have to have. And unfortunately, as both partners, it doesn't matter male or female, you have to be prepared to either side take a back seat for a moment. Not saying you got to take a back seat forever, but maybe take a back seat for a moment and then you can come back into it later. It doesn't hurt to say, maybe not right now, but maybe in 2 to 3 years from now, something to that effect.
Yeah, and I think it goes along the lines of communication because, and I think we talked about this with, was it Elma? I can't remember. Sir,
yeah, you did. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I listened to it. Yeah.
As a man's perspective and as a father, my ex-wife works for CDC. And I think sometimes guys get this mixed up when they go to talk to their spouse. But I honestly would be 120% against my wife doing like gangs, SWAT. I mean, patrols, obviously. I'm 100% being a cop in general. However, people get that mixed up. They're like, oh, well, why? Because she's a female? No, because we're males and we're protectors. So I think there's also a difference between a guy who's like, no, can you fucking either retire or just go to patrol? Please make it home every night. Be there for our wife and kids because I'm the one that should be out there. I'm the one that should be doing the dumb shit and jumping through windows. So I think there's this weird kind of fine line that sometimes husbands just don't articulate it well. You know what I mean? Of like, hey, I don't want you working gangs and constantly gone and away from the kids. Like, because there still is men out there who want to be men and people are going to hear this and be like, well, women can be that too. I understand. But you just got to see it from the perspective of who in the hell would raise their hand up and be like, oh, hey, there's a SWAT call out. Can you guys put my wife at the front of the stack? Has nothing to do with her can't handle it. Like, fucking, as men, you should be a little against that, but doesn't mean you're not letting them like go out and do things. But I mean, that's a hard spot to be in, like as a man, to just let your wife go out and do that. Like I was just sitting there thinking about it, like I would be against it, but probably for different reasons. And some of these
Right.
narcissists would be, mine would be like, man, I'd like to retire my wife and never have to be out there again. My
Yeah.
wife's a school teacher now, and that's scary enough as it is. But
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh
so
yeah. That's really
I
scary.
think that's a whole different dynamic in itself too.
Yeah.
Like,
I was just
would it
gonna say.
offend you? Would it offend you, like if your husband? Because again, I know you guys' relationship. You guys are different than a lot of these married couples because you're both good people. But would it offend you or bother you if like he was being that type A, got to protect you, get out of my way, get the wife, get the kids, get in the car and drive away. Let me handle this gunfight on my own. You don't belong here. Or like, but you get it. You kind of get that side of it too.
I get it, because as many times as us women in law enforcement or any first responders think, I got this, I can handle this. We can, not saying we can't, but there's a little small part of us, we like that protection. We like our spouse, if he's law enforcement or not, we want to feel like when we're home. I like feeling like the wife, the mom, the woman. I like putting on a nice dress. I like putting on makeup. I right now I don't have any of that on. At work, I don't care what I look like. But when I come home, I want to be treated as that soft, that mother, that feminine feeling. It's nice because when you're at work all day, you're one of the boys. I mean, my department now, it's there's more females, but I don't work in the unit with them. I only have, I think, one in my unit. Um, but all the other ones are guys, and we're out there like trying to find people, we're interviewing people, we're doing all this work for these attorneys, and it's nice to have, I'm just one of the boys. I'm seriously, I will go to lunch and I'm one of the boys, but when I come home, it's nice. It's, what is it, a Kitty Chesney song? It's just nice to feel like the woman with you. It's a
Yeah.
nice feeling. So I actually wouldn't be super upset, because I know where his heart's at. It's not because he's, like you said, and he's not a narcissist. His heart is legitimately in the right place, because he wants me to be home. He wants me to be with the kids. He knows that, I mean, he knows this. He says it all the time. This house just does not work when you're not here. It just doesn't work the same. Um, it's just that missing piece. I feel the same about him though. When he's gone for training or whatever, I just feel like the house doesn't work the same. So for, I think, majority of law enforcement officers that are female, I think we can all agree that we just like that soft feminine feeling when we come home to our house. We don't want to feel like the cop. We don't want to feel like we have to always be on guard. We want to, because I'm gonna tell you what, Taylor, just right now. So the school, let's go into that. Drop offs, pickups, kids, going to school, talking to parents. I already feel like a weirdo, because at my kids' school, probably only 50% of the females work, 50% of the moms work full time. Okay. So I'm already a weirdo right there because I work full time. To top it off, now I'm in a job where I'm mostly with men. So I feel like an outcast when I go to my kids' school, when I go to any events. They have the parent teacher meeting, or not parent teacher, the PTA. Their meetings at 8:15 on Tuesday mornings. I'm like, who can do that? I can't do that. So I'm not the involved parent. Stop it, you Gilbert. But I'm not that involved mom. Like, if I have to be involved, I have to take the day off. And then they try to have these conversations, and sometimes it's really hard for me. As much as I try to be that mom, that woman, that girly girl, you're treated so much like a guy at work that it's really hard to do that when you're with all the PTA moms and you're talking about the bake sale, or you're talking about, how little Johnny has been picking on little Susie, and you're like, huh? Oh, my kid will just punch him in the face. I mean, I shouldn't have said that. Like, my kid knows to go talk to a teacher. Like, my kids don't. They probably would just punch him in the face. Especially my boy. My boy would probably just punch somebody in the face. But they don't put up with it. My daughter is going to be this teeny tiny little thing. I taught her how to like handle herself. So when we're at home with spouse, whether he's in law enforcement or not, just want to feel like the girl that you found attractive, that you think of as just a girl, I think.
Yeah, I know it does, and it brings up so many deep questions in the marriage, and I don't have time for it today. But it's just like, I don't know. It is interesting hearing the female side of it, and then knowing her background and knowing him. Like, they are definitely unique personalities. But I mean, I think I think you guys are an example of how to do it right. I mean, I'm sure you could tell us, everybody has some types of issues and growing pains, but I truly do. And I've seen you guys for years. Like, I do think you guys do it right because you guys have done a lot of things right. Like, the job is not your sole identity, for one. I mean, it's a big part of both of you, right? But you didn't marry him because he was a cop. Like, you didn't fall in love with him because of his badge. Like, yeah, that's what he did, but you guys got married as people. And I think, like I said earlier, that's just where people get lost. Like, oh, you're married to a cop? Yeah. Oh man, that must be a shit show. And it's like, you all know, like, whether he was a teacher or a cop or vice versa, your significant other is whatever profession, you're still people. And like, listening to you over the last 30, 40 minutes, whatever it was, you're essentially just describing two people who are married, who have a little bit better understanding of each other's careers. Like, you don't let the job interfere with you guys. There's no like one upping. I'm sure there's always some type of little competitive side of it, or hey, it's my call out, my turn, like you're talking about. I'm sure that would be really interesting. And then having like the male, but yeah, I think you guys have just done it right. You guys are a good example. I'm sure we won't get anybody here who did it wrong. I mean, I guess I was married to a CEO and we got a divorce. I could speak on that one, but really had nothing to do with the job. But yeah, no, I just think it's good. I mean, I think there was a lot of good points in there. And like you said, his heart, and you guys are married to each other's hearts and not the badge. And I think that's just where people go way fucking wrong.
Yeah,
I
agree.
think one of the biggest things to highlight, like you guys were talking about, when I was listening, was how Jessica said, like he's like the yin and yang type of thing. Like the mindsets they're different and slightly, and they just work for each other. Because the biggest thing that I think that works like on my side and like listening to that story is just it comes down to communication, like you were just talking about, and being able to communicate. How she said like he knew what he was getting into before he married me. Obviously, she's a cop. She's working here. He works at this different department. He's a cop. You know what you get into. And even if it does come down to like the roles of what you want to do, it comes down to communicating. Like before you get married, it's like, what kind of person is this person? Does she just want to work, patrol full time and kind of just be home and be a mother, or is she like pretty hard charging? Like I want to do, like how you said, Taylor, like you wouldn't want like your significant other to be on SWAT or major crimes like that. But what if the girl before that was like, hey, this is my goals, this is what I want to do, just so you know beforehand. Then at that point you can kind of sit down and think like, shit, do I really want to be with this person long term?
No, I think
As much
I
as
think
you
it's a
love
really
them,
good idea.
yeah, because as much as you love them, you could be like, oh, I really love this one person. It's just that's the one thing that bothers me. Well, then you have to really sit down and think like, do you want
Mm-hmm.
to force her to not do something, or her force you to not do something because of that one thing? And it's like, honestly, like this, maybe it's not going to work, maybe it will work, but just really just communicate with the other person, open and honest. Like, this is my mindset. Honestly, this is really my mindset, and no one's going to stop me with whatever I want to do. Because then you have resentment later, I think. Like, you stop me from doing this is what I really want to do, and whatnot. And I think that's how marriages kind of fall through. So it's like, just communicate, because everyone's different. And I'm with Taylor. I wouldn't want Emily to be in the position I was, and to be opposite me. Me working at UPS. It would be hard. And I'm pretty sure you being married to a cop, I'm pretty sure you get nervous, or he gets nervous when you go on call outs, or when he goes to calls. It's like,
Yeah.
regardless if you know what they signed up to do, you don't want to think about them getting into a OIS or a situation where
Yeah.
it's use of force. So I can only imagine. You know what it so most like civilian wise, they know the job is dangerous, but they don't know, right? You
Right.
know,
Right.
you investigated the crimes of OISs or use of forces, so now you know this is something that could really happen to my
Mm-hmm.
husband, and what do I do? So, can you kind of go on to that, like shit, like how do you even? Because you know exactly the violence of what could occur, and it
Yeah.
came too for you,
So.
like how Taylor's saying, like even if you're just working patrol, like did
Yeah.
we see, some crazy shit happen? So, yeah, how do you do
Yeah.
that?
So I think going into that, so he met me when I was on patrol. He was on patrol. I had come back from one of our small cities that we took care of when we met. I did make a change trying to, I guess, set up a better family life for us, and it just didn't work out. I actually went over to welfare fraud um, because I thought maybe I'm still going to be a cop. but this is better for my family. And which was really cool. Like, Gilbert, you weren't there yet, but Taylor was. You guys all got it. You guys all understood why I did what I did. And it was just so nice to still have that support from you guys, even though I left. But you guys still were like, we helped each other out a little bit during that time. You know, you guys still knew you had a connection over with me. And but after a couple of years, and then I had my daughter, it just was not. He knew I wasn't happy. So he knew having me come back. I came back as a reserve, and I got put into backgrounds, which that was great. But he ultimately knew, and I told him, like, hey, one day I'm going to go into, go back full time, and I did. But seeing everything that I've seen, and him seeing everything that he's, it brings up a bit of anxiety. I don't get called out anymore, but when I would get called out at the time, I think it probably did. As much as he usually was still a deep sleeper when I would have to leave to go out to 2 a.m. calls. But once he knew what was going on, or he woke up in the morning, read what was going on, or whatever the case may be, he got a little anxiety when he could tell like my hyped upness. And so I think, again, I made another switch. I ultimately, where I'm at now, it's ultimately the job I wanted to do since I was 15. But the anxiety isn't there as much anymore. We don't really go out on the streets as often anymore, but we're still out there. I mean, wearing guns and badges out in the public, and I could still get ambushed at any time. But the OIS stuff, yeah, I mean, it for both of us, that kind of, especially nowadays, how everything's going, that's on the top of our minds when we're out there with our guns and badges on. He goes out to a lot of call outs for traffic accidents, obviously, and he goes out for OISs, so he gets to see a little bit more than I do nowadays. I get nervous when he's out on scenes because now how crazy people are getting is someone going to drive by and shoot at them? Is somebody gonna? He even said now, like, he's putting on his full gear. He used to not have to do this, but now he has to put on his full gear when he's driving to work, because he doesn't know what he's going to come across. And I'm getting to the same point too, as I put on my bulletproof vest on my way to work because I have no idea. Yeah. So yeah, the anxiety's there because we know what happens, but at the same time, we know who each other's partners are. When I worked with you guys, huh?
I was just about to go into and ask that right now, but you keep going. No, I was just gonna ask because, like, is his mindset when he thinks about your crew? So I know from experience working with you as a partner, my mindset was it's not kind of I don't know, Taylor, kind of explain for me, but like, I don't want to look at it as like, oh, I'm gonna protect Jessica, but that's my goal, because like, not so much I'm a male, so I'm more superior. It's just that's just my nature. So it's like, I don't care. I'm just gonna I'm gonna go first. This is what's gonna happen. Like, if something goes down, we're gonna protect this one right
and
here.
It's always gonna be like that.
And
I know exactly. And like, I don't care. People listen, because the day that and like, I get and this is a whole nother topic as well. But this whole like defund masculinity or whatever the hell it is. But like, listen, the day that guys, especially cops, or let's say we're on a scene, or there's, and somebody comes after a female officer, the day that we're like, oh yeah, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, the day we look at that the same, like, we've lost our core values. And so I know what you're talking about, because I'm not saying her husband always thought that, but like, I would think that, like, if I knew, like, if my wife was a cop, I would want to know who was on the ship, like, because I'm gonna be like, yeah, that dude's gonna fucking handle business for several reasons, but he will be the guy to jump in front of a bullet, not obviously because you're a partner, but because you are a female. And like, people can take that however you want, but that is just, it's who we are as men. We're not saying you need that extra protection or you can't protect yourself. That is just going to be a natural reaction, a natural thought. I mean, I do that. I would do that with rookies too. Like, just because not because of their gender, but because they were brand new. And like, not that a female needs extra protection. That is just who we are. Like, we're protectors. So yeah, you want to know, I mean, and vice versa. Like, you're no different. Like, you want to know guys out there are going to protect your husband, or his partners are going to protect his husband, protect your husband. Like, it goes both ways. We just speak on the behalf of men of like why we do it. A female may hear this and be like, that's bullshit. I don't want you protecting me. And honestly, that's exact attitude you should have of like, I can handle my fucking business. Yep. And that's why we're a good team, because you can handle your business and I'm going to fucking do even extra to protect you. Like, that's just how it goes. But, and I think the
Yeah.
partner thing goes a long ways too, if you know people. And we talked about it before, there's guys on the shift who don't tolerate infidelity or like not going to do this, try to hit on your wife or your significant other, blah, 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 blah. That goes a long ways as well. And vice versa. Like, you don't want your husband working on a team full of a bunch of badge bunnies, you know what I mean? Like, granted, he's not going to do anything, but you still don't want him there in that environment. Like, so that's where it goes on to the partner thing as well, and knowing the team, trusting that they're going to make good decisions.
Right. No, I agree with that. And I always thought of you guys, even working with you guys or working with the crew that I work with, you're like my brothers, your family. And like before all of the COVID crap hit, like I remember we would get together, we would do things with each other more often, be at work doing things. I remember my husband come in a couple of times, while we were working, come visit. The kids wanted to come by, things like that. And he got to know you guys, but then the crew now he's starting to get to know them. That's why we try to go to events that we have within our unit, because I want him to get to know them for multiple reasons. One, so he has a name and a face to put together. Two, he can see that the camaraderie, that's just a big thing to me. I'm very big into the camaraderie within your team because, like you said, Taylor, I feel that if you have that with your team, like I don't need to worry that you got my back. I don't need to worry that if we get out of this car and go contact this shithead at their house, that if he starts shooting, that I don't need to watch what you're doing because I know we both know we'll have each other's back. We'll get where we need to go. We'll get radioed in. We'll do what we need to do. But I want to have that conjunction with my team and that cohesiveness, because then we all know how to work together without messing it up and getting somebody hurt. And I feel that that's a huge deal. And I feel like nowadays you're not seeing that. Actually, some departments are very much like not wanting you to become cohesive with your people. And I don't know if it's because they don't think work's getting done. I don't know if they think because some people are screw offs. I don't know if they think if it is a gender thing. I don't know what it is, but it's like you don't have that though, that trust and that workability to know your partner, to know that they're going to have your back, and that it's just not there. And I mean, I remember back in the day, like having barbecues at people's houses. I remember, shift wise, we would have barbecues together. We would go get dinner together. Even something as simple as just going and getting dinner or ordering a pizza and bringing it back to the office and eating it. Something that small where we had 10 or 15 minutes to talk and bullshit about stuff, that made you closer. You may find out that you have connections,
No, I agree. And I think No, I think it's good because I think spouses get to meet each other or like partners and beat partners of who you're working with. And I mean, it's just, there's so many different reasons why. Like we used to always say, like on the SWAT team, we would always make sure like we met each other. We would, meet each other's wives and kids, because our rule was, if you don't know my wife's name or kids, don't go knock on her door if I die. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I don't want someone knocking on my fucking door who's never met my wife and kids and telling them how sorry they are when you don't even know. You have no idea who my kids are. Never met maybe you don't know my kids, but you don't even know my spouse. And so without shift parties and stuff like that, and, at least like we always talk about like the dichotomy of that is like doing too much of, because you can do cop parties together and not just be 100% about cops, right? But if you bring everybody together, then spouses get to meet the partners. And you know what I mean? That super jealous wife or husband can be like, oh, he's pretty cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like I heard bad things about him, but he seems really nice. And then it just makes it more personal. And I don't know, it goes so much deeper than that. I don't know. It just does. Like I can go on and on about that and tell stories, and people are going to think all cops are cheaters. But I just seen like if a guy, like if as a man, like I meet somebody's husband and say they're a new cop, and like later on, not that I would ever turn a blind eye to it, but like I kind of see her or like some guy just kind of always hitting her up. I know it's personal for me. Like, yeah, she's there or they're there, but then I'm like, hey man, we've met her fucking husband. Like, well, like fucking get out of here, go play. Or you should probably be like that anyways. But I'm sure that makes sense to you. Like now that you're kind of personal, you know them, you see their face, and it makes it personal when you have, if not, you have zero connection. to the other side of the house. So I don't know. I
Yeah,
definitely think there's some benefits to that.
and I would always make it, because knowing being a female in this job, I would make it like, hey, I want to meet your wife. Like, I want her to meet me. Let's do something so that she can meet me. Because I can kind of understand where women come from when somebody comes home and says, oh, I have this chick that works on my shift. And then she's like, there's a girl on your shift. I can kind of understand where she would be coming from. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
still a woman. I could still get jealous. And so I can understand where that feeling. So that's why I would always make like, hey, bring her by, have her go on a ride along. I want to meet her. Like, oh, she's on a ride along, dude. Hey, let me meet her. Let me talk to her. And because I wanted them to know that I'm not there for that reason. I'm there to do my job. And also, now I know you, I know your family. I'm going to protect your family. And if that means I got to do something to where I can help, Gilbert out on a call to where I save his life, maybe, or whatever, hey, you know what? You still have him in your life. And I remember after certain incidences, I would, talk to the wives or talk to the spouses. And it's just like, the connection was just there. So it made it more deeper when you worked with that person side by side.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. But before we get going, I wanted kind of you to ask, or pretty much, because talking about your relationship with your husband, like how Taylor said, like you guys are different, and you have learned so much, and you're doing everything differently than most people, so you don't have like this. Again, 12 years is awesome, you know. So, what advice would you give to another cop who's married to a cop, and it kind of, because I'm pretty sure it wasn't perfect at first, and there's that learning curve, you know. So, what advice
Mhm.
have you learned in that 12 years that you would give to them to put them in a better position working in the same profession?
So I still think the communication thing is huge. Keeping them in the loop of like you said, kind of like if there's a specialty assignment they would like to do, um, that's nice to kind of keep them in the loop, to talk to them about it. I think to create plans. I mean, as cops and being type A, you should be a planner. That should be something that's innate in you. That you want to plan. Always communicate and talk about your future plans, because if there's something that doesn't jive, you need to hit it head on and either decide we can get over this hump or we can't. You have to kind of start making some decisions. Um, and I would never tell a female like, hey, change your mind because of, or change what your path is because of him, because he's in law enforcement, wants to do this, this, and this. It's not about changing, but it's going to take compromise. There's going to have to be compromises made on both sides. But, you know, for me, it's weird to say, like, when it was just the two of us, it wasn't just the two of us for very long. But when it was just the two of us, like, it didn't matter. We both could work shift work, whatever the case may be. But once kids kind of came into the world, my perspective changed. My viewpoints, my wants, my needs changed, and the job kind of became second compared to when it was first. When we're young and single and could do whatever we want. Once the family started to grow, it became second. And it was I did have to communicate with my husband, like, hey, I want to do detectives, but what do we need to talk about? What do we need to get on the same page about? But that also took me talking to my sergeant and saying, hey, look, I'm a mom. When I went into detectives, I think my son was only a year old. So that was pretty big, to have a pretty much a baby still at home and a 4-year-old. Um, so I was having to, and my group, thank God for you guys. And I had discussions with you and conversation with you guys, just like, hey, look, I'm going to need some help. I think the communication has to be there, but just not with your spouse, but you got to make sure everybody's on the same page and willing to help you. And if you're not with a department that's not supportive like that, maybe you need to start looking for another department.
Amen. I appreciate you coming on, Jessica. Thanks for taking out your time to come on here and tell us about that. Taylor, do you want to say anything before we get going?
No, I think it was really good. And I think there's a lot to take away from it. Not even doesn't even have to do like being a wife necessarily, which I liked it. I mean, it was really great advice just as a law enforcement spouse. Whether I like his way Jessica broke it down, like it really relates to anybody, not like cop married to cop
Yeah.
or cop not cop or male cop female cop. That is just great fucking life and relationship advice in general. And I think if we stop overthinking, oh, we're married to a cop, so I got to act different and do what Jessica and her husband do and do it well. Like they're just a married couple who both happen to be cops, right? And I think when you look at it in that perspective, yeah,
maybe
like,
we're not as
seriously.
messed up as we thought.
Yeah, so I think it's just great advice overall. And no, I appreciate you coming on and being vulnerable and kind of putting that out. And I appreciate your husband letting you come on. We didn't air too much dirty laundry about him, so it's good.
There's nothing really to air.
I was gonna say this.
easygoing.
He's got no skeletons. That's not fair.
Yeah.
No, he's very easygoing, go with the flow. I mean, like I told him, I said, hey, today I plan on doing this podcast with the guys, and he's like, oh, I can work from home today. I can help you out. And so that was kind of cool that,
That's awesome.
he's got a great supervisor and his job gives him some flexibility. So.
No, that's good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And remember, if the wife is venting, just listen.
Just listen. Someone's venting. Lesson of the day. Listen and read the conversation. Do I engage or do I just listen? Read it, right?
Yep.
Read body language.
Definitely.
Hope you all be safe.